with the Ontario Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Agribusiness. And I'm here with John van Logtenstein from DLS Biogas. So John, great to have you here.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Awesome. So let's talk a little bit about, to start with DLS and how you are in the anaerobic digester business and sort of what's your primary focus projects that you've completed broadly. So what's your organization about?
Yeah, so DLS Biogas started in 2010. It kind of spun out of our sister company, Dairy Lane Systems. So we are a milking equipment company selling milking parlors, robots, manure equipment. Around that 2010 time, maybe slightly before that, the feed-in tariff program started to come about in Ontario, and we were starting to get involved with biogas plants. We had one customer in particular that was looking at expanding their operations and building on a completely greenfield site. And part of that expansion activity was also building an anaerobic digester plant. And back in those days, if you Googled digesters, it was theoretical articles. There really wasn't a lot going on in the space. So we decided to dabble our feet into that space and get involved. And then, the feed-in tariff program came along, and then that's when we kind of officially incorporated DLS Biogas as a separate company and really looked at pulling our strengths from the dairy equipment space, the manure equipment handling and everything that we were doing, and applying that to the biogas space. So that's how we got involved in the space. And since that time, we've been involved in primarily electricity generation projects because that's what the market in Ontario was calling for. So it was roughly, I think we've built roughly 15 facilities since that time. All of them been electricity generation except for two renewable natural gas facilities. So those are ones that we developed in the last, say, 5 years. And part of the reason is the market's kind of shifted towards that space, or at least it was shifting towards that space. We do feel that, there's an emerging opportunity on the electricity generation side with the electrification trend and everything like that that's happening, throughout the world, Ontario as well, no different than elsewhere, maybe more so in Ontario with some of the big investments that are occurring in the space. So we do see that as a big opportunity for us.
That's great. So you have some different models in terms of some of your facilities are owned by the farmers, some are owned by you. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. So our traditional model has been building the facility for the farm. So we are, the contractor, we're developing the project, and they are the customer, and they buy, an anaerobic digester facility from us. Essentially turnkey is how I would consider it. And that is how we've traditionally sold. Somewhere around like 2013 or so, we had two projects where that model just didn't really fit for that farm. So we actually came and approached them with, or at least two farms, with a different model where we said, okay, we will invest in the facility, and after a 3-year period, you guys can purchase it back from us. And that never actually ended up happening. And we've stayed on as owners, and it's worked well. Like, we have good relationships with the farms. We have split responsibilities on the sites, and then there's like a revenue split on the feed-in tariff revenue that comes off of those sites. And that's been an interesting model for us. It's been nice, like from a recurring revenue standpoint and everything like that. So we have been looking and seeing if there's been other opportunities, but in the electricity generation space, we didn't really have too many of those opportunities since that time. When the renewable natural gas play came out, we decided to approach one of our, probably one of our larger customers, or for sure one of our larger customers, and see if they were interested now in looking at doing a digester facility and partnering with us on it. So that ended up, the development of that ended up taking quite a while, but I would say like some point in 2019, 2020, we started talking with them on it, and they decided that, they wanted to go down that path. So that's at Walker Farms in Aylmer there. So we worked on developing a renewable natural gas facility at that site. And we did that. I think we started, I can't really remember when we started construction activities, but we've been operating for not too long, but a short period of time now, and we've been injecting renewable natural gas into the local utility and selling that gas to Fortis in British Columbia. So we have a long-term 20-year offtake contract for the sale of that gas. And a question that we often get on that is, how does the gas actually move to British Columbia, right? And the answer is it doesn't really. Like the physical molecules of the gas stay within that local distribution network. The gas doesn't go upstream. Usually as it goes from Alberta east or wherever it's going from Alberta, it keeps kind of going downstream in pressure or down in pressure. So you're not going to go the other way. But what happens is we sell it locally and it all works on a model of displacement. So the gas we sell here means that that local utility does not need to buy gas from Alberta or a fossil fuel source for that gas. So we are displacing gas that would have otherwise came from Alberta. And so how the actual physical transaction works, or the actual transaction works with Fortis, is we are using the proceeds of our physical gas sale here to turn around and purchase gas in Alberta. We have a trading, or that's the trading hub with Fortis there. And then we do a handshake transaction, or our gas marketer does, and they basically transfer that gas to Fortis. And we attach the environmental attributes, because that's what Fortis is most interested in, with the event, or we attach the environmental attributes associated with that gas to the gas that we purchase in Alberta and are passing off to Fortis. So that's how the actual transaction works. So it is a little bit more complicated than the electricity side. And, in some ways, when I think back about it, I think, the electricity side was the good old days. It was simple, and it was, you had one party to transact with, and there was a meter, and, whatever you produced, you had a bill or a revenue statement, let's say, at the end of the month, and that money went into your account. So on the RNG side, there's a few more steps to actually get the gas to where it needs to be. All that being said, it does open some other opportunities, right? Because, with electricity, your market was here in Ontario. With the RNG side, we could technically sell the gas to the US or Quebec or, some of these other markets. And so that definitely is an interesting aspect of it. And that's what's kind of, I think, opened up, even if you look in the US or other areas of Canada, it's opened up the market to this further development activity.
Great. And so Fortis, when you're referring to Fortis, that Fortis BC is the British Columbia, one of the natural gas utilities there. So it's kind of like Enbridge here in Ontario.
That's correct. Yeah, there's a few utilities in British Columbia that are selling gas. Fortis is the largest one, and they're kind of focused in that southern BC area. So that's where the majority of the customers would be as well.
So when you worked with the dairy farm there, so there was engaging with the local utility, there was a gas marketer that you mentioned, and there was contracting with Fortis BC. Can you talk about your role, the farmer's role? What does it look like to enter into those processes? How does working with a service provider like yourself? In your case, you're also providing technology and you're working on the contractual side of things. So just maybe talk a little bit about, for instance, the Walker experience and what that looked like with them.
For sure. So it is a lot of work. I'll say that right at the get-go. A lot different than the electricity side. So what we quickly realized was that there is a lot of contracting that occurs. You're interfacing with the utility. There's an injection station that's needed. There's an agreement that's required for that. There's a gas purchase agreement required. There's this gas marketing. Like, I haven't signed as many NDAs as I have in the last 5 years when they started doing RNG. It's just, there's so much contracting.
Is a non-disclosure agreement?
That's correct. Yeah.
So everything is business confidential and so on.
Yeah. And I mean, like what I'm saying here, it's all like publicly available, you know, our Fortis contracts on the BCUC website, you know, they have you know, the sensitive information redacted, but it's not, it is like a public, in the public domain. But yeah, so like what we quickly kind of learned or quickly found out, let's say, during that process was that, you know, it is a long process, and we cannot do it with, you know, with the electricity generation. It was like, okay, we are going to be selling the anaerobic digester equipment, and, you know, everything that we do pre-project, you know, pre-shovel in the ground is kind of, you know, part of that sale process. We kind of split it into two different, like going forward, what we've done is we split it into two processes. So like we will help, you know, on the project development side, and then on the equipment install and you know, technology side. So we kind of split into two processes. So like the reason we did that is just because of the volume of work, the number of hours that that were required to get these projects off the ground. Like the other thing that's kind of really come about with the kind of came out with the renewable natural gas side, but I think it's just something that's kind of developing. It's developing just in the market in general, and it's the carbon intensity scores. Mm-hmm. So like, you know, we've had to develop in-house expertise, or we've had to hire people and then train them on the in-house or to gain in-house expertise on the carbon intensity side, because it's so important to these projects and how much, you know, the utility will end up paying these customers. So like,
let's just talk about that briefly. So the carbon intensity is the creation of that gas means that natural gas didn't have to get produced. That's part of it. But different sources of renewable natural gas will have a different carbon intensity based on where the gas comes from and what activities avoided, right? So
yes,
landfill would have had a little bit of methane emission from the landfill. When you use that gas, that methane doesn't get emitted to the atmosphere. An anaerobic digester, the manure tank, would have had a methane emission, and when I harvest gas from that, then there's not a manure tank emission. And so depending on that baseline activity, a landfill or a sewage plant or a manure pit, we get a different carbon intensity, and a manure-based digester is seen to have one of the best carbon intensities.
That's correct.
What else do you have on that? What in terms of what else can you share there?
Yeah, so it's like the challenge that we've had is you have different models per jurisdiction. So, you know, if you're looking at, you know, there's the clean fuel regulations within Canada, which is a way to monetize the gas that, you know, an anaerobic digester is producing. And they really look at the delta, or the difference between, you know, the reference carbon intensity of natural gas, you know, and what your project is. So the difference between that is kind of, you know, the greater the difference, the more valuable your gas is. So if you can get into like a negative carbon intensity, you know, you're just keep pushing that difference greater and greater. You can extract more dollars for that gas per unit of gas. They use a program called the Open LCA model. If you go to Fortis,
what is so just say what LCA refers to, and what does that model mean?
Low carbon. I don't even know what that A stands for.
Life cycle.
Life cycle. Sorry.
Right. What does it mean? I was asking you because I couldn't think.
All right, we're good there. And then the other one, if you go to Fortis, it is GH Genius. And you know, if you ended up going to go to California, you know, you're looking at GREET. And so you have these different models, and oftentimes, you know, there's potential to play in both markets, right? So now, you know, not only are we doing things on the contracting side for, this is kind of pulling it back to, you know, why we do this initial project development type agreement, but not only are we looking at, you know, the contracting with, you know, the local utilities, the gas marketers, et cetera, but you're also looking at, you know, carbon intensity and what the carbon intensity is of that project. And you're basing it on, you know, a theoretical feedstock profile, because nobody really knows what they're going to be feeding. They have a good idea, but, you know, reality is going to be different than what you wrote in your model or what you thought it was going to be. So there's like some risks in there. So we're trying to like give a very fair representation of what we believe the model is so that we can get the appropriate price for the gas. You don't want to sell yourself too high and say, oh, I got a minus 300 and this is the price I want, because you're going to fail. But you also don't want to go completely the other way, because then you're not going to get paid enough. So you have to strike that balance as to what you feel comfortable, but what risk you're willing to take. So a lot of what we're doing is kind of like figuring out what the best approach is to talk to the utilities at. Another thing we end up pulling in there is the financing side. Like these projects, we do all the financial models for the projects. We help with the presentations to the lending institutions, whether it's their own lending institution that they're used to dealing with on the farm, or it's somebody else that we've worked with in the past. So we're kind of building these models and showing these lending partners what these projects can do and what the paybacks are and what we think realistic expense numbers are, so that we can really build that business case and help that customer get financing. We also end up getting involved in the grant writing for a lot of these projects, because there is government incentive programs that are available to support these renewable natural gas renewable generation facilities. So these are all kind of the steps that we have to take before a shovel even touches the ground, right? So that's why we started to kind of front load some of the costs on that end. One, because like our investment was getting quite substantial. So we needed some commitment from the customers. Okay, yes, you're doing it. And we needed some payback on the hours that we were putting into these projects. So that's why we have structured it in that way. And I think, when they see the work that's going into it, it does make sense to do it that way. Like we can't do it based on a potential project. We need to really all go in with a full commitment that, hey, we're going to be looking at developing this project. And, there's going to be some investment to get it to that point.
Okay, so talking about individual projects then, so when we think about the carbon credits, you talk about all the markets and the carbon intensity and all that. As a farmer, there's carbon credits that are being generated as a result of this activity. There's emissions reductions that are occurring and so on. In this process, then, the farmer is selling most of those credits then, or can you articulate like what credits is a farmer selling in this process? And so what does that look like in terms of ownership of credits and selling those credits?
Right. So I guess like, it really depends on the model that you have for the digestion process. So like if you were, a partner in or the sole owner of the anaerobic digester facility, you might not necessarily care that you are foregoing your credits associated with your manure, because you're monetizing it in the form of the gas that you're selling or the electricity that you're selling, right? There's a clear relationship between the credits that you're generating because you're doing an emissions reduction activity and the financial benefit that you're receiving. I've heard other models, and I've heard some questions from farms, that because it is we're talking about some future activity and, a future market, and we don't have 100% visibility as to what these credits are. We certainly do not have 100% visibility. It is a unknown market as to what these credits are going to be trading at. So, signing on to these contracts can be a bit scary, right, for the farms, because they don't know what kind of value they are potentially foregoing, right? Like if they are entering into a manure supply agreement where they might not be involved on, the digestion process, and they're not really getting anything from the digester, but they're supplying manure and they're getting some value for that manure. The question naturally is, okay, what is this manure worth, right? And, from a gas production perspective, yeah, there's value in it, but there's also a lot of cost to actually extract that gas. So there's not a lot of incremental costs that can actually be, or incremental value that can be shared with that manure, with that manure provider. But I don't know what the future holds. That could change where, and so I guess what I'm saying is I understand the hesitation, right, for some of these people to sign on to these agreements because they don't understand where that market's going. And, I don't have that crystal ball either to say where it's going. So, entering into deals where, you have control over that, might be the risk mitigation that you're looking for. But, is there a place for these manure supply projects? Absolutely, right? Like there is, because, there's, you have to be of sufficient scale to make these projects work. And, you might not be of that scale. It's just the reality of the Canadian farming landscape that a lot of the farms in Canada, the vast majority, are not of the size that will support a renewable natural gas or even electricity generating project. So I say even because we find that the renewable natural gas projects have to be larger than the electricity generating projects. So that, for me anyways, like that is, a way to kind of get yourself involved in these projects. And I think that, supplying the manure is, a potential on some of these projects, very similar to, the Danish model where they have these manure, not necessarily manure only, but these cooperative style digesters. And, the farm is bringing manure into the digester. Obviously, if you think through it, there's an added cost to doing that. There's a trucking cost of manure. There's, a disposal cost of that manure. So there's definitely complexities in the model that need to be, evaluated to see if there's actually a viable project.
One of the cool things that you're working on is you have a project where there's an existing feed-in tariff contract, and then there's going to be a new, bigger generator that supplies electricity sort of on demand to the market. So I wonder if you could talk about a little bit about that setup. It's a neat idea because the electricity model, even when you have this bigger cogen, can probably work for more of a mid-sized Ontario dairy. So I wonder, instead of the RNG, what this electricity marketplace, new opportunities there, and what you can describe for us there.
Yeah, so there is this ISO LT1 procurement program that is a capacity. They have two different kind of streams. They have the capacity, and then they have like the kind of like demand-based program, right? Where they're not really looking at production, but they're looking at stability into the system. And so the one project you're referring to, they have a 250 kilowatt fit contract, and they were one of the sites that was awarded a 1 megawatt ISO LT1 contract. So they are doing a project where they're going to be installing another gas dome. They're going to be storing gas on site, right, to run through this ISO LT1 contract, and they're going to be running biogas through it. So it is a, you're asking about, where does it fit with the, let's say, small to medium-sized farms. Medium-sized probably more appropriate. It's a really good fit, the electricity, because the infrastructure costs are quite a bit less. And like as you see in this example, where he's able to stack additional kind of contracts onto his existing facility. Yes, he has to invest in additional electrical infrastructure, additional biogas storage, some biogas conditioning equipment and stuff like that. But it is a incremental cost to kind of increase the, substantially increase the capacity of the system. And it isn't, if you look through, some of the opportunities I see coming up, and particularly for existing digester facilities, I think it's a really, really interesting option. The LTT program is more on the production side and building more production capacity. And I think it's a great opportunity for, these existing contracts and potentially new projects to enter into the market. I think, you saw it in Germany where, a lot of these existing fit contracts that were offered like a standard price for 24/7 production, they were either recontracted or they had like an expansion occurring on them for, maybe double the capacity, but only during these windows, right? And that's what I see happening here. That's kind of the model that's developing with the LT1, but then also with the LT2, where, you might end up having a project that maybe has a small cogeneration unit that runs maybe in a net metering scenario to kind of heat the digester running 24 hours, but then it also has a larger unit that runs, 8-10 hours a day during peaks to provide electricity. And then when the peak isn't there, it just shuts off, right? I see that as an interesting model that could develop in the market here.
Right on. So you have a few other projects that are just sort of in the development hopper right now. And so maybe just tell us briefly, like, what type of projects will those be? Electricity, renewable natural gas, and then talk about, in the current marketplace, those farmers who are stepping into the market now, what's their motivation? What opportunity do they see? Some of these projects have been brewing for a long time. And so what has brought those farmers to the market today?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, like in terms of the projects and development, we have several that are in the permitting stage or in that final like home stretch before construction starts. So it is an exciting
do they have
time.
energy contracts already lined up, or are you doing the permitting anticipating that a door will open on the contracting?
They have term sheets lined up. They don't have the final contracts, but it is something that's actively occurring right now, like the negotiations on the contracts. So, there's several kind of options where they can go with, I guess this will answer one of your other questions, which was, are they electricity generation or the gas? They are gas. These next projects are gas generation projects. So there's several options where they could go, but we are kind of going down a particular path for these projects, and they're gas generating projects. One is on what we're seeing now too is slightly different project profiles. Like one's a dairy, one's a beef, one's a hog, right? So it's different than what we traditionally we're doing. The vast majority of our projects, probably 95% were dairy. You're starting to see some of these other animal type farms kind of coming out of the woodwork and getting interested in the space. So yeah, I think, like looking over the next year and a half, I think we'll probably have 2 to 4 projects in some sort of construction state, and they will be. I'm not gonna 100% commit that they will be gas, because you never know what happens with the electricity space. But they
it could
are
be that they change their
developing.
mind at the last minute. That they say, "I was going down this path, was ready to sign," and then something changes.
I would say like
Okay.
2 of them are gas.
Okay.
The other 2, don't know yet, right? Like that could change, right?
Oh.
Like it doesn't necessarily change, our side of the project, right? With the digestion or, the nutrient management approvals and stuff like that. It doesn't, it might tweak it a little bit, but some projects are better suited for electricity. They're either a bit smaller of a farm, the gas infrastructure is not there. Like one project in particular that I'm thinking about, the idea is, virtually pipelining the gas. And so what that means is, there isn't a direct gas pipeline at the road that the project can connect into. So they actually have to load the gas, compress the gas after it's gone through the upgrading process and, been converted into essentially the same as fossil natural gas, and then compressing it, loading it on a truck, and then bringing it to a offsite pipeline injection location. So that's what virtual pipeline means. But there's a cost associated with that. So, if we can, transition that project to an electricity generation project, you forego that cost, you forego the actual, like, the equipment cost, but also the annual operating cost. Maybe the project gets slightly more right-sized for the farm. Those are things that we think about and see as opportunities to kind of position the projects. At the end of the day, what we want is the right project on the right site, right? Like we don't want to put a project somewhere where they're going to be behind the 8 ball and not meet their production targets or what they expected for the profitability of the facility. So we want to make sure that these projects are kind of appropriately located for success. So
And so last question is around the farmers and their decision-making journey as you have seen it to get there. So some of these have been brewing a long time. So talk a little bit about the decision-making, the perseverance, the flexibility that is required to see these projects to the end, and how the farmers then are kind of navigating all the decision-making.
Yeah, so I think that's a really good word, perseverance, because and determination. Like, you need to want this, right? Like, it's not, hey, call DLS and I want to build a biogas plant, and then we're there, the next month putting a shovel in the ground. Like, it could be a 5-year development process from the time you talk to us, right? And that's just getting all those like pieces together. There could be a government incentive program that comes out that we know is coming out in 6 months that, hey, we're not actually going to build this project. We're going to delay it and try and get that funding. Like, all these things kind of delay the project, and they're pieces that are critical to kind of, getting it and supporting the financial, prospects of the facility. So, I think that, that is a key. Like, we need people that want to do these projects. And, I would say, with the electricity generation side, we were actually going around and finding the customers, or like often like saying, hey, let's put in a contract. And if we get a contract, then we'll talk about what the model looks like and build a facility. That was kind of the model at that point. Now I find we're getting called by people that know about biogas, right? They know about renewable natural gas. The market's a lot more educated. They want to do this. It's in their kind of either succession plan or their 5 to 10 year plan, and they want to, either get another business opportunity. They want to diversify their revenue. They want to do some environmental sustainability initiatives on the farm. There's a variety of reasons why they want to do it, but like, I find that now it's people coming to us saying, I want to do this, and then we're helping them along that, journey, let's call it, right? Because it is. And if they have questions, often, we have done it before, so we can often answer them, but a lot of times, like, we're figuring out stuff too with them at the same time, right? This carbon intensity stuff, it's new, it's developing. The CFR program, new, developing, like, what does that mean for these projects? So like, we're always learning here, and we're always trying to share that kind of what we've learned with new projects, right? And that's a big part of the whole picture, is just, this information dump, and, getting people on the same page as us so that they know 100% what they're getting into, what the complexities are, what the opportunities are, because we don't want to sell anyone a project if they're not, 100% committed to the idea, because it won't succeed, right? This is a relationship you're entering into for 20 years, and you got to want to do it, right?
Cool. Excellent. Well, this has been really fascinating. Really appreciate it, John. Thanks so much. And we'll be sharing your contact information as well with this. And so thank you for your time. Really appreciate it.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
Great. Thank you.